The scent hit me first. Polished wood, sweet lilies, something faintly chemical from the floors still damp in spots. I stepped through the arched entrance of the ballroom, the clink of glasses already bouncing between the chandeliers. Laughter circled the room like it belonged there. I didn't. I kept my shoulders back, heels steady. Navy blue wasn't black, but it wasn't a celebration either. It was the color you wore when you didn't want to be the loudest grief in the room. Couples posed under a golden light wall. Someone's child screamed in delight. Margot's friends were already half tipsy, waving napkins like flags. No one looked at me, which was a relief until it stung. A girl in a headset tapped my elbow. "Hi, miss. This way." No name. No question. She led me past perfectly lined tables, through rows of ivory place cards curled at the corners until we stopped, near the kitchen doors. She gestured to a table tucked behind a tall floral arrangement, close enough to smell the bleach wafting from the restrooms. I nodded, didn't speak. The chair creaked as I sat. Direct line to the bathroom sign. Two cousins I hadn't seen in years sat across from me, both glued to their phones. Aunt Doris was slouched sideways, snoring softly under her sequined shawl. No one noticed I'd arrived. I traced the edge of the tablecloth. Maybe they were short on space. Maybe it was alphabetical. Maybe. But no, you know when you're being pushed aside. It doesn't shout, it just folds you out of the picture. When I was 12, Margot and I used to sneak extra cake together under the dessert table. Back then, we were sisters. Now, she was the centerpiece, and I was an afterthought dressed in navy. The chair beside me remained empty. I had asked them to leave it for him. James. 8 weeks gone. He'd hated weddings, said they were theater. But I wanted the space beside me untouched. I thought it might feel sacred. Instead, it felt abandoned. No one asked. No one even glanced at the empty seat. When the waiter offered me champagne, I declined. He blinked, waiting, then moved on. "No, I'm sorry. No, how are you holding up?" "Nothing. James would have made a joke. They'll swarm you. You're the sister of the bride. They love you more than you think." He believed that. I wanted to. People avoid grief like it's contagious. They'll send cards, flowers, but they won't sit beside it, especially not at a party. James's family, who lived 3 states over, had called me every week since the funeral. Mine hadn't, at least not to ask how I was, just to confirm my RSVP. My mother once told me, "Don't make things about you." It was her version of a lullaby. I learned early, if you're quiet, you're easier to love. But silence can be a shield, or a blade, depending on who's holding it. From where I sat, everyone walked around my table, never through it, like I was a misplaced statue. My dress, wrinkled against the plastic chair cover, a stark contrast to the velvet thrones at Margot's head table. I'd ordered my meal 3 days late. Maybe that's why they tucked me here. Or maybe this was always the plan. I noticed the place card with my name was missing. Just a blank space where something should have been. Fitting. I ran my fingers along the edge of the table, tried to gather myself. I mentally rehearsed a speech I'd never say. "I'm not here to ruin joy. I'm here to survive grief." I pictured myself standing, walking to the center, switching seats. But I didn't. I wasn't here to reclaim anything. I was here out of obligation, tradition, survival. I sat back, let the chatter wash over me, and whispered to no one in particular. "Let them keep their spotlight. I brought my own shadow." She didn't raise her voice, but what she said cut through louder than any microphone. Diane moved like a politician, not a mother, gliding past well-wishers, nodding in rehearsed rhythm, smiling the way people smile when they're both proud and in control. I noticed her walking toward me the moment the DJ introduced the next round of toasts. I didn't move. I wasn't going to chase a conversation that had never belonged to me. She stopped at my side, reached down with a half-empty glass of champagne in one hand and the other brushing at my shoulder like I had lint. "There," she murmured, just loud enough for nearby guests to think we were sharing something sweet. Her lips barely moved as she leaned in closer. "You're a walking curse," she whispered. That's it. Just 5 words. Then she smiled again and walked off, nodding toward a cousin I barely recognized. I sat there, didn't blink, didn't breathe. 5 words, and all I could think about was the way she said it so casually, like she was finally admitting something she'd rehearsed her whole life. I didn't need her to yell. My mother never yelled. Not even when I broke a dish or skipped school. Diane's specialty was silence laced with shame, precision over volume. I didn't chase her. What was I going to do? Ask her to repeat it? Instead, I just sat, sipped from my water glass, and told myself I'd misheard. But I hadn't. The moment stuck to me like sweat. People around us kept clinking glasses. Someone let out a sharp laugh. A toast was made to Margot and her new husband. A beacon of love in this dark world, someone said. I grinned. Or maybe my face just twitched upward. It didn't matter. Everyone else was looking at the couple draped in champagne light. No one noticed my hands shaking under the tablecloth. American civility is an odd thing. We dress up detachment like it's dignity. We throw parties to outrun our grief. We raise glasses instead of questions. I held my breath for a few seconds, then let it out slow. I wasn't cursed. I was just convenient to blame. My mother didn't look at me again for the rest of the night. I glanced at my place card, finally. I'd skipped over it earlier, thinking it didn't matter, but now I stared straight at the words. Ms. Orion Vale, guest of the bride. Not sister, not family, guest. I scanned the other cards around me. Childhood friend, beloved aunt, groom's mentor, all warm, all intentional. My title felt colder than the ice in my untouched drink. Had Caitlin done that, or was it Margot's choice? Hard to tell. They moved as one now, curating every detail like this wedding was a press release. I stared down at my name again. Even my grief was too loud for this wedding. Later, a server walked by with a bottle of wine. He paused by my table and asked, "Are you over 21?" He laughed like it was a joke. I didn't. I just said, "Yeah." He poured anyway. The woman next to me chuckled politely, looked away. Everyone always looks away. Some families are like playlists. Only the happy songs make the cut. I'd been skipped like a track no one wanted to hear. Being labeled a guest here felt like being uninvited from my own bloodline. I lifted my glass, finally, took a sip. Didn't taste it. They didn't want to see me. But I'd make sure they'd feel it when I left. The room dimmed slowly, the kind of dim that makes people whisper softer, lean closer, pretend to be reverent. A projector flickered to life at the far end of the hall. Chairs turned, phones lowered. Someone shushed a kid mid-sugar rush. I sat up straighter than I'd been all evening. A cousin brushed past me and whispered, "Caitlin made the slideshow herself. It's sweet, you'll see." She smiled like someone about to show off a homemade quilt. I nodded and pretended that meant something. Maybe this was it. Maybe there'd be one photo. Just one. Maybe I'd see James again, even for a moment, up there smiling like he never doubted me. The hum of the machine blended with the clatter of dessert plates. Somewhere nearby, the smell of roasted nuts and frosting hung thick in the air. And then the screen lit up. First frame, Margot as a toddler, cake-smeared cheeks. Next, Margot at ballet, first day of school, prom night, graduation. Caitlin was in nearly every photo, arm in arm, front and center. And me? When I did appear, barely. It was at the edge. Cropped shoulder. Back of my head. Once, my arm around Margot was blurred out entirely. James wasn't in a single frame. Not from the family beach trip. Not from that dinner where he brought wine that everyone complimented. Not even from my own engagement party where he'd made dessert because the caterer bailed last minute. Gone. Like he never existed. The crowd clapped politely. Diane dabbed at her eye. Someone whispered, "She really held the family together." I gripped the edge of my table. I had taken half of those pictures. The narration began. Caitlin's voice, smooth and trained. Through everything, Margot was our anchor. In hardship, in joy, she never stopped giving. She taught me what resilience means. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe too deeply. I watched. The photos changed. Vacations, hospital visits, family fundraisers, moments I had paid for, arranged, cleaned up after, a trip to Colorado I'd funded when Diane lost her job, a birthday dinner I'd booked for Dad, all now stories Caitlin was telling, with Margot as the hero, and me vanished entirely. One slide showed Margot blowing candles on a mountain deck. I remembered that cake. I made it. I remembered the wind blowing frosting sideways. I remembered standing behind the camera thinking it was a good shot. In this version, it was Diane who made the cake, Caitlin who set up the trip. This, Caitlin said through the mic, is what family looks like. This, I thought, is what erasure looks like when it smiles. Around me, people sniffled, smiled, murmured their admiration. My mother beamed like she'd just witnessed sainthood. Elijah, my father, sat still. But then again, he always did. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Layla. "Hang in there, I see you." I didn't reply. What was I supposed to say? That being invisible hurts more when it's curated? I stared down at my water glass, fingers cold around the base. Watched the condensation slide down in little trails. James once told me, when they rewrite your story, keep the receipts. And I had. Emails, invoices, photos, all of it, still tucked away in folders, still real. But I didn't stand up. Not yet, not tonight. I was building something, slowly, quietly, without a mic, but not without a voice. As the applause died down, Caitlin stepped back to the mic. Her tone shifted, suddenly sweet with suspense. "And now," she said, "a special tribute to someone you'll all be shocked to see." I sat up. My heart tapped once, hard. "Let's see what story you tell next." The lights came back on just as the last photo faded from the screen. People clapped. Someone whistled. A few guests reached for their napkins, pretending to dab at imaginary tears. Servers started weaving through the tables again, trays of short ribs and roasted vegetables in hand. I adjusted the note cards in my lap. 4 pages, titled, "For the Sister I Thought I Knew." Not bitter, just honest. I had trimmed the sharper edges, softened the humor. It wasn't about revenge, it was a bridge. One Margot could have walked across, if she'd ever wanted to. The MC tapped the mic again. "All right, folks, let's hear from some of the people closest to the bride and groom tonight." He listed them quickly. Best friend from college, cousin from Chicago, both sets of parents. I kept waiting to hear my name, but it never came. I sat there still, didn't flinch. When the cousin stood up and walked toward the mic, I half rose from my seat. Margot caught my eye from across the room. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, but her headshake was clear, small, sharp. They didn't forget. They decided I was unworthy of the mic. By the time the toasts ended, the room was loud again, silverware clinking, someone at the back cheering too hard over a joke I didn't hear. My speech rested in my lap like a ghost. I slid the pages into my clutch, pressed the flap shut. No one at my table noticed. I used to think I was just the quiet one, the introvert, the one who didn't like attention. That's what they always said. When I turned 12, I'd practiced a birthday speech for the whole family. Diane had made a cake with a crooked smiley face, and Margot threw a tantrum because hers didn't have sprinkles. My speech never happened. Dad told me later, "She's younger. Let it go." James used to tell me, "Your voice doesn't echo, it anchors." Now it anchored nothing. "Let's get all the single ladies up for the bouquet toss," the DJ boomed, dragging me out of my head. The music changed. Caitlin's maid of honor was already heading toward me with a hand outstretched. "Come on, Orion, you can't hide tonight." I started to say no, but she was already tugging me to my feet. I stood there under the disco lights with a circle of women at least 10 years younger than me, all in glitter, heels too high, drinks too full. I caught sight of myself in a mirrored wall, still in navy, still alone. Margot stepped forward, holding the bouquet high. Her eyes locked with mine for a moment. Then she turned her body slightly and flung the flowers hard, away from me, directly toward a woman on the edge of the circle. They landed in the woman's lap. Cheers exploded. The DJ whooped. Margot clapped and yelled over the music, "Guess Orion's streak continues." Someone laughed a little too loud. I didn't cry. I laughed too. the low kind, the kind that doesn't come from amusement. Then I turned and walked away from the circle as the music shifted into something fast and forgettable. In the hallway, I paused by a framed sign outside the ballroom. It read, "Love is the greatest legacy we leave behind." I stared at it a while, not because I believed it, but because I wondered who they thought wrote that. Margot's voice echoed inside the room, layered over by music and chatter. I didn't text anyone, didn't grab my purse, didn't leave. I just stood there for a long moment and whispered, "One more hit, just one more, and I'm done pretending." After the bouquet toss and the plastic cheers that followed it, I didn't return to my table. I couldn't sit there again, not with the empty chair beside me and the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. Instead, I slipped past the dessert cart and into a side hallway that smelled like aging wood and peppermint breath mints. I needed a bathroom. Or maybe just a minute where no one was watching. I climbed the staircase without much thought, my heels quiet on the old carpet. Upstairs, most doors were closed, but one stood slightly ajar, light seeping through just enough to suggest it wasn't abandoned. I pushed it open. The room was small, no signs, no decorations, just a couple of worn chairs, a scratched table, and one framed photo of Margot and Caitlin from years ago. Some beach trip. My face was in that photo too, at least half of it, cropped at the chin. I sat down slowly. The air was cooler here, and for once I could breathe without pretending. There wasn't a table number, no centerpiece, no place card, no name. A folded paper taped near the door read, "Reserved, staff overflow." The ink had smudged, probably from a rushed print job. Bridesmaids used this room earlier to change dresses. Now it had been repurposed for those who didn't. Quite fit into the curated version of family. I looked around. No coats, no gifts, no trace that I was ever meant to be here or anywhere in this day. At my own wedding, I'd made sure everyone, even my awkward cousin from Texas, had a handwritten welcome note in their seat. I remembered how James laughed at how overboard I went with details. "You're building a hotel, not a wedding," he'd teased. But I wanted everyone to feel seen. Funny how no one saw me now. I wiped a thin layer of dust from the table with my sleeve and leaned back. This room fit me better than their perfect tables. Voices outside the door pulled me from my thoughts. Two men walked in, paused when they saw me, then continued talking like I was invisible. "Who's the woman in the navy dress?" one asked. "Friend of the bride, I think, or with the caterer," the other replied, not even trying to whisper. I didn't say a word, just sat still. Even in this family, I'd become a ghost. For years, I thought silence was control, that if I didn't cry, didn't lash out, didn't demand, I'd earn respect. But silence only works when people care to listen. The men left, still talking about golf and somebody's divorce settlement. A bridesmaid opened the door next. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Oh, I thought this room was empty." A nervous smile. She backed out quickly. I turned to the mirror. The dress was wrinkled around the hips. My hair had flattened from the heat. Makeup faded. I looked like someone halfway between a guest and an afterthought. I unlocked my phone and opened the ride app. My finger hovered over the screen. James's voice came back, clear as day. "When you walk out, make sure it's not for them. It has to be for you." I locked the phone. I wasn't ready to vanish again. I pulled a lipstick from my bag, fixed what I could in the cracked mirror, and stood up, straightened the shoulders, smoothed the dress. "I'm not done," I told my reflection. And I wasn't. I walked back down the hallway, not to confront, not to perform, just to exist where they didn't want me to take up space they hadn't offered. At the bottom of the stairs, a little boy dashed around the corner and bumped into me. He looked up, big-eyed and out of breath. "Are you one of the helpers?" I looked at him, not mad, just tired. "No," I said gently, "but I guess that depends on who's asking." The speeches were done. Glasses clinked, laughter swelled again, and people started wandering toward the gift display like bees to sugar. I stayed seated at first, not because I wanted to be there, but because I didn't want to move just yet. The applause still rang in my ears, though not for me. Then the MC read from a folded note in his hand. "A special thank you from the bride and groom. to our loving family, generous friends, and those who made today unforgettable. Names followed. Names I knew. Names that had done less than I had. To Aunt Sharon for the rehearsal dinner, to Dylan for helping with the playlist, to Mrs. Goldman for the lemon bars. I waited. He didn't say mine. Not once. No mention of the check I'd written 2 weeks earlier to cover the floral deposit. No nod to the times I picked Margot up when she cried through her first divorce. No whisper of the nights I stayed up folding wedding favors for a marriage I wasn't even sure she believed in. The guests clapped, glasses raised. People nodded in gratitude. They didn't just forget me. They decided who deserved to be remembered. I took one slow sip of wine and tasted none of it. Just the burn of something I couldn't swallow. You give, and they take. And if they can't use your name to shine, they erase it. I stood eventually and walked toward the far end of the room, where gifts were displayed on white linen-covered tables under warm lighting. The smell of vanilla and wood polish hung in the air. Then I saw it. A crystal lamp, pale blue and gold-trimmed, perched perfectly on a pedestal. A small card beneath it read, "Vintage heirloom from mother to daughter." My breath caught, but not from shock. That lamp was mine. I'd bought it for Diane on her anniversary with Dad. A rare moment I tried to bridge the coldness between us. Picked it out from a boutique in Charleston, wrapped it in tissue myself, wrote the card by hand, and now it was her legacy to Margot. A woman beside me whispered, "That must be from Diane's side, so elegant, so storied." I didn't interrupt, didn't correct her. I just stared. So am I. But no one ever said it. I stepped back and took out my phone, snapped a photo of the lamp and the tag. I wasn't going to scream, just record. Then I typed a message to myself. Note to self, never give what they'll claim without credit. Margot stood not far off, receiving compliments for the decor. Diane was beside her, proud and polished. They looked like a team that had won something. I wasn't mad anymore, just awake. They weren't killing me with cruelty. They were erasing me with polish. Their version of family didn't have room for grief or truth, just presentation. And my pain? It wasn't invisible. It was inconvenient. I looked at the lamp again. How perfect it must have looked in the slideshow. How shiny it must feel to inherit a story that was never theirs to tell. Then I did something I didn't plan. I turned to my cousin Rachel, who stood beside me admiring the gifts. "That lamp was mine once," I said quietly. "Now it's hers. That's fine, but facts don't change." Rachel blinked, unsure what to say. I didn't need her to. I walked away before she could respond. I wasn't interested in sympathy. I just needed one thing: to draw the line. I whispered to myself as I passed the next table, the buzz of chatter surrounding me like static. I've been kind. I've been silent. This is me, drawing the line. I headed toward the dessert table. My feet moved without asking permission from the rest of me. I wasn't hungry, just wanted to stand near something that didn't talk, didn't lie, didn't look at me like I was furniture someone forgot to move. The young staffer stepped in front of me, neatly dressed, fresh haircut, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me," he said, glancing at my name tag. "This area is for guests only." I blinked. Took a second to process it. I didn't raise my voice. Just showed him my tag, turned so he could read it clearly. His eyes skimmed down to the screen in his hand. You're not listed on the family sheet. Maybe you're part of catering?" Silence stretched like wire. I said, "No, I'm the bride's sister." He flinched, then smiled too quickly. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Really, must be a mix-up." Of course it was. Behind me, a cousin laughed awkwardly. "That's what you get for wearing neutral colors. You blend right in." I didn't answer, just walked away from the cake table without touching anything. I kept walking. A kid, maybe 7 or 8, tugged my elbow as I passed the bar. "Where's the restroom, ma'am?" I pointed him down the hall. He hesitated, then asked, "Are you the helper with the drinks?" I crouched, looked him in the eyes. "No," I said, voice low, "but I used to help around here a lot. No one noticed then either." He nodded like he understood more than he should, then ran off. I turned down the corridor that led toward the bridal suite. Something tugged at me. Maybe it was the string of photos lining the walls. Margot at 5 in a tutu, Margot at 16 with braces, Margot in her cap and gown. Every event framed in white and gold. I paused at each one, scanning for any sign of me. Once, my hand was visible on the edge of a frame. Another time, the top of my head behind Diane's shoulder. That was it. I was there, but never really there. And then came the centerpiece, Margot's engagement portrait, enlarged to the size of a poster board, mounted on an easel and placed dead center in the hallway, blocking the main exit. Guests stopped there like it was an art installation, posed, pouted, lifted phones. "This is where legends are made," someone said. I stepped around them carefully, smiled politely. Inside, something bent. Legends are just loud stories told often enough. I found a corner and let myself breathe. Eyes on Margot across the room, graceful, praised, untouched by consequence. I didn't want her spotlight. Never did, but I was tired of being asked to dim mine. James used to say, "They don't have to clap for you to dance." And he was right. I opened my phone and started typing in my notes app. Not on family list. Mistaken for staff. Engagement photo blocking exit. No mention in speech. Diane's lamp story. Bouquet throw. Deliberately away from me receipts. Proof. Not to throw in their faces, but to remind myself I wasn't crazy. I walked back to the photo display. The oversized engagement print stood too proud, too centered. Without thinking, I stepped close and nudged it half an inch off-center. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to ruin the symmetry in every selfie. A teenage girl saw it, frowned, straightened it again. I waited until she left, then tilted it back. Let's see how well they edit this moment. I headed back toward the ballroom. My phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. Thought you should know. They're planning a surprise tribute to Margot. You're not included. I didn't flinch. I typed back without thinking. Good, because I'm planning something too. The clinking of glasses faded when the MC called for attention. I was standing near the edge of the room, half shadowed by a floral arrangement, pretending to scroll through my phone. I didn't look up until I heard Margot's name. She took the mic with her usual smoothness, like she'd been born with stage lights on her. "We'd like to take a moment," she said, "to honor a few people who made today unforgettable." My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard of any tribute, no mention during the planning texts, no clue this was coming. Her voice was syrupy, practiced. "This isn't just a wedding," she said. "It's a legacy, and legacies are built by the women who came before us." I knew that tone. It wasn't gratitude, it was branding. The projector buzzed back to life. On screen appeared a lamp, my lamp. A pale blue Italian crystal lamp set on a tablecloth I recognized because I'd bought it, for Diane, as an anniversary gift years ago. Margot's voiceover came in soft. "Passed down from my mother, a symbol of grace, resilience, and continuity, a true heirloom from one generation of women to another." Then, a photo of the lamp. In my old apartment, me in the background pouring tea, unaware I'd be cut out of the story. Not one person flinched, except me. That was mine. That was the last piece of me I ever offered. I whispered it, not out loud, just to myself, just enough to taste how bitter it felt now. Margot smiled, her hand resting gently on Diane's shoulder. My mother's eyes sparkled. Applause built slowly like a wave, reaching a climax just as the lights came back up. Then Margot said, "This day is proof that light always triumphs. That family lifts each other." Diane dabbed at the corner of her eye with a linen napkin. I stood still, my hands at my sides, my shoulders square. Every erasure, every mislabel, every moment I was left out, blamed or used, ran through me like a montage of someone else's wedding. They wanted polite? They got it. But this was the last page. I walked slowly toward the stage. People turned their heads. Some whispered. Someone laughed nervously. I stepped up to the mic. Not the one Margot had used. Another one, meant for backup, meant for accidents. I took it in my hand, let silence settle. They say family lifts each other, I began. Sometimes they bury you. Under applause. I looked out over the crowd. That lamp? I gave it to Diane, not as a symbol, just a gift, a quiet one of many. I've given a lot of things to this family. Time, money, grace, my voice. Pause. And in return, they gave me silence. I turned toward the screen, still frozen on that photo. You can repackage the story all you want, I said, but you don't get to own it. Silence followed. Long. Uneasy. Someone coughed. The DJ fidgeted. Diane rose slowly. Not a word from her. Margot tilted her head like she wasn't rattled, but her voice trembled when she finally said, "Thank you for that." Elijah, sitting alone near the corner wall, gave a small nod. Just once. That was enough. People shifted in their seats. A few glanced my way and nodded. I didn't cry, didn't flinch, didn't move. A woman I didn't know patted my arm as she passed. "Took guts," she said. Another just whispered, "Thank you." I said nothing. The lights dimmed again. A cousin leaned in from behind me and murmured, "You just rewrote the whole evening with a single paragraph." I smiled, barely. Then maybe they'll finally learn how truth sounds. The music had softened. Most guests were packing up their laughter, stuffing leftover cake into napkins, waving goodbye with arms full of flower arrangements. I stayed near the door, somewhere between gone and not yet ready. A young server walked toward me, balancing a tray under one arm and holding something under the other. A folded booster seat. He stopped, looked at me kindly. "This is for your table, for the baby, right?" I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. There wasn't going to be a baby. There never would be. I smiled, tight and practiced, and said, "No, that's not necessary." He nodded and moved on, disappearing into the hum of silverware and small talk. They'd forgotten he died. They never even knew I lost them both. I wasn't just the widow. I was the mother who never got to be one. People fear women like me, not because we weep, but because we remind them that nothing is guaranteed. I stepped outside, past the glowing bar, past the half-empty glasses and closing platters. The air hit colder now, cleaner. A breeze moved through the leaves, just enough to feel like someone was walking beside me. There was a stone bench near the fountain. I sat. Their night was ending in glitter and applause. Mine had ended before it began. Their happily ever after. My invisible funeral. For a second I wondered if I should have said more. Should I have read the speech? Said it louder? Called them out? But silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. James used to say that grief doesn't need volume. It just needs space. So I sat. And I let myself cry. Not for pity. Not for anyone else. Just one time. For me. The door creaked behind me. I didn't turn. Footsteps. Then Elijah. My father. He didn't say anything. Just sat down next to me. We sat like that for a long moment. Then, slowly, his hand came down on my shoulder. It wasn't dramatic. Just steady. I didn't cry again, but I leaned toward him. Just a little. He didn't apologize. Didn't explain. But for the first time in a long, long stretch of years, he stayed. That was enough. Later, when I opened my phone, I found the note. The one that held the speech I never gave. I reread it slowly, quietly. At the very end, I added a line. This was never about being heard by them. It was about hearing myself again. I hit save. Not to post it. Not to prove a point. Just to remind myself that I still own my voice. Maybe healing isn't loud. Maybe it just sits next to you without asking questions. Before I left, I stepped back inside once more. The gift table was nearly empty. I placed a small box at the center. No tag, no wrapping, just a black and white photo inside. James and me, laughing. It wasn't a threat. It was a receipt. I walked out through the side door, my spine straight, my chin up, my name still mine. The wedding was over, but something else was beginning. At my car, the night air still clung to my skin. I opened the door, ready to leave it all behind. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. That was brave. I saw all of it. I didn't reply. I smiled and whispered, "Good, let them remember."